They cut my trees while I was at work, not by accident, not from a storm, not even pretending it was maintenance. They cut them clean, fast, and only on the side that blocked their view, and by the time I got home, the only thing left standing was the part that didn't matter to them. That was the moment I realized something. This wasn't about landscaping, this was about control. I remember the exact color of the sky when I pulled into my driveway that evening. That kind of deep orange you only get right before the sun drops behind the hills. It should have been peaceful. One of those quiet moments where the world feels still, but instead, something felt off. Like the air was too open, too exposed, like someone had taken a wall away without asking. I sat in my truck for a second longer than usual, just looking ahead, trying to figure out why everything suddenly looked whiter. Then I saw it. At first it didn't fully register, because your brain doesn't immediately jump to someone trespassed and cut down part of your property. You look for simpler explanations, maybe wind damage, maybe something fell. But as soon as I stepped out and walked toward the back fence line, that denial started to crumble. The trees weren't broken, they weren't torn, they were cut. Clean cuts. Intentional. Surgical, almost. I had a line of maples and old cedar running along the back edge of my land. Nothing fancy, but they'd been there longer than I had. Tall enough to block the ridge behind my property, tall enough to give me privacy. Or at least they used to. Now they looked lopsided. One side of each tree was stripped almost bare, branches gone in smooth, angled slices, sap still wet, and glistening like the job had been done just hours earlier. The other side untouched, full, almost mocking what had been taken. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. They didn't just hack away randomly. They trimmed only the uphill-facing sides, the side that blocked the view from the houses above. And that's when it clicked. Behind my property sat a development called Silverline Ridge, gated, polished, the kind of place where every house looked like it came out of a catalog. Glass railings, outdoor kitchens, infinity edges, fire pits you probably light twice a year just to say you have one. They built it about 6 years ago, carved right into the hill, and from up there, yeah, the view was incredible, valley stretching for miles, sunsets that probably made people feel like they'd made it in life. Except my trees were in the way, or at least they had been. I stood there for a long time, just staring at those cuts, trying to process the audacity of it, because this wasn't just someone trimming over a property line by a few inches, this was someone making a decision for me, on my land, without even the courtesy of a conversation. And the more I thought about it, the less it felt like a mistake, and the more it started to feel like someone testing how far they could push. I went back inside, still trying to keep my head clear, because anger without proof doesn't get you anywhere, and the last thing I wanted was to walk up that hill and start something I couldn't back up. So I did the one thing I knew would tell me the truth. I pulled up my security footage. I've got a couple cameras around the property, nothing fancy, just enough to keep an eye on things, deliveries, wildlife, the usual, and it didn't take long to find what I was looking for. 10:14 a.m. A white utility truck came in through the rear access path, not the main road, not where someone would normally enter unless they didn't want attention. 2 guys got out. Safety vests, helmets, chainsaws already in hand. No hesitation, no checking, no knocking, just straight to work like they'd done this before. They moved fast too, cutting in sections, dropping branches in controlled pieces so nothing fell into the wrong area. It was clean, efficient, professional. Too professional. And what really got me? There was no logo on the truck, no company name, nothing that tied them to anyone, just a blank white vehicle and 2 guys who clearly weren't worried about being seen. I leaned closer to the screen, zooming in frame by frame until I caught the license plate, a little blurry, but readable enough, and I wrote it down. That's when something shifted for me. Up until that moment, I was still hoping this was some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe a contractor went too far. Maybe someone assumed the boundary was different, but the way they came in, the way they worked, the way they left, that wasn't confusion. That was permission, just not mine. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was scared, but because once you realize someone crossed a line like that, you start wondering what else they think they're entitled to and how long it's been happening without you noticing. Around midnight I got up, walked out to the back again, stood there in the dark where the trees used to block everything. And for the first time since I bought that place, I could see lights from the houses up the ridge. And that's when I noticed something else. Small red dots. At first I thought they were just reflections, maybe porch lights hitting glass or something. But as my eyes adjusted, I started to count them, 1, 2, 3, more than I expected. Cameras, mounted along the edge of that development, angled downward, not toward their own streets, not toward their driveways, but toward my land. Toward me. I stood there a little longer, just letting that sink in, and I remember thinking, real quiet to myself. All right, so that's what this is. It wasn't just about a view. It was about visibility. And suddenly, this wasn't a neighbor issue anymore. This was something else entirely. The next morning, I grabbed the plate number, got in my truck, and drove up to Silverline Ridge. And that's where things really started to get interesting. The gate at Silverline Ridge wasn't subtle. Tall stone pillars, polished metal, cameras tucked into every corner like they were guarding something important, or maybe just expensive. I pulled up, hit the call button, and waited, watching my own reflection in that little black lens while a voice came through, calm, practiced, the kind of voice that's used to filtering people out. I told them my name, said I needed to speak with whoever handled the HOA. Kept it simple, didn't mention the trees, didn't mention the cameras, not yet. There was a pause, a soft click, and then the gate slid open like I belonged there, which, in a way, I guess I did, just not in the way they expected. Driving up that hill, you could feel the difference immediately. Everything was curated, controlled, every lawn trimmed to the same height, every driveway spotless, like someone had decided what perfection looked like, and everyone agreed to follow it. And the higher I went, the clearer the valley became, wide, uninterrupted, except I knew exactly what had been removed to make it that way. They had taken my trees out of the equation. The HOA office sat near the top, glass front, clean lines, a row of framed sunset photos inside like they were selling the view as much as they were managing it. I parked, walked in, and was greeted by a woman who smiled just a little too quickly, like she already knew why I was there. Or maybe she just smiled like that at everyone. Either way, it didn't reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm looking for whoever oversees property boundary issues." There was a flicker there, small, but noticeable. One moment. I sat down, took a look around, noticed the details, brochures about community standards, a display about preserving property value, phrases like harmony and shared vision printed in soft fonts. And for a second, I almost laughed, because there was nothing harmonious about what I had walked into the night before. About 10 minutes later, a man stepped out from the back office, mid-50s, clean-cut, confident in that quiet way that comes from being used to authority without having to raise your voice. He introduced himself as Daniel Mercer, president of the HOA, extended his hand like we were about to have a friendly conversation. I shook it. We sat. "So," he said, folding his hands neatly on the desk, "what seems to be the concern?" I watched him for a second, just long enough to make it clear I wasn't here to dance around it. "Yesterday morning," I said, "someone came onto my property and cut a significant portion of my trees. Clean cuts. Professional work. Only on the side facing this development." He didn't interrupt. Didn't react. Just nodded slightly, like he was listening to a weather report. "And I'm trying to understand," I continued, "whether that was authorized by this association." A pause. Then he leaned back, exhaled softly, and gave me a look that was almost sympathetic, almost. "We've had some discussions recently," he said, "regarding shared growth along the property line." I shook my head before he could go further. "They're not shared." Another pause, this one tighter. "Our understanding," he said carefully, "is that certain vegetation was encroaching in a way that affected multiple homeowners' views." I let that sit for a second, then leaned forward just enough. "That's not my problem." That's when the tone shifted, not dramatically, but enough. He clasped his hands together again, this time a little firmer. "We're willing," he said, "to compensate you for any trimming that may have occurred beyond what's considered reasonable." I almost smiled at that, not because it was funny, but because it told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a mistake they were trying to fix. This was a situation they thought they could settle. "Let me ask you something," I said, keeping my voice level. "How long do you think it takes to grow privacy?" He didn't answer, just held my gaze. And in that silence, there it was, not an apology, not even acknowledgement, just calculation. I stood up. "I'll be in touch," I said, and turned before he could respond. Walking out of that office, I felt something settle in my chest. Not anger, not anymore, something clearer than that. Direction. Because up until that meeting, I was still hoping for a conversation, maybe even a resolution that didn't involve escalation. That hope was gone. When I got back home, I pulled out every document I had, survey maps, deed, property records, laid them across the table, and went through them line by line, not because I doubted what I knew, but because I wanted everything airtight. And it was every boundary clearly defined, every inch accounted for. There was no gray area here. Which meant what they did wasn't just disrespectful. It was illegal. But the trees, as frustrating as that was, they weren't the part that stayed with me. It was those cameras. So I went back outside, this time in broad daylight, walked the entire boundary line slowly, deliberately, and looked up. Really looked. There were more than I'd noticed the night before, mounted on poles, attached to corners of houses, some angled just enough to avoid being obvious. But once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. Every single one pointed downhill, toward my land, toward my house. One of them, I swear, had a direct line toward my bedroom windows. I stood there, hands on my hips, just taking it in, and I remember thinking, this isn't oversight. This isn't poor planning. This is intentional. And suddenly, everything lined up. The trees weren't just blocking a view. They were blocking sight lines. I walked back inside, grabbed my phone, and made 3 calls. First, a surveyor, someone recommended by a guy I trust, not cheap, not fast, but precise. Second, a lawyer, real estate, property disputes, the kind of person who doesn't get emotional, just effective. Third, the contractor. That part, I didn't overthink. By the end of that day, things were already in motion. Saturday morning, the surveyor showed up. Older guy, quiet, didn't waste words, just got to work like he'd done this 1,000 times. Measured everything twice, checked angles, cross-referenced maps, and by Sunday afternoon, bright orange stakes started going into the ground along my property line, one after another, clear, visible, impossible to ignore. I didn't have to say anything. Those stakes said it for me. Monday morning, my lawyer sent out certified letters, formal notice of trespass, property damage, and potential invasion of privacy. Carefully worded, no threats, just facts, the kind that make people realize they might have stepped further than they intended. And Tuesday was when the contractors arrived. 2 trucks, early, efficient, materials already prepped. No delays, like they knew exactly what they were there to build. I walked out, coffee in hand, and one of the guys gave me a quick nod. Fence going right along these markers? He asked. I looked at the line of orange stakes stretching across the back of my property. Then up at the ridge beyond them, at the houses, the glass balconies, the cameras that hadn't moved yet. Exactly along that line, I said. He nodded. Got it. And just like that, we started building something they couldn't ignore. They started early, like before the sun had fully burned off that thin layer of morning fog that hangs low over the valley, the kind of quiet where every sound carries just a little farther than usual. You could hear the metal before you saw it, the clank of panels being unloaded, the hum of equipment warming up, steady, deliberate. No rush, no hesitation, just a job getting done. I stood there with my coffee, leaning against the side of the truck, watching it come together piece by piece, and I'll be honest, there was a part of me that wondered if this was going too far. Not legally, not logically, but socially. Because once you build something like that, you're not just solving a problem, you're making a statement. And statements, they echo. The first post went in just after 7:30. Deep, solid, permanent. Then another, and another, until the line started to take shape, stretching across the back of my property like a boundary that had always been there, just invisible until now. The panels followed, thick steel, matte finish, no gaps, no decoration, not ugly, not pretty, just final. By mid-morning, it was impossible to ignore. I noticed movement up on the ridge, silhouettes at first, then clearer shapes as people stepped out onto their balconies, coffee cups in hand, arms crossed, trying to figure out what exactly they were looking at. A couple of them pointed, one disappeared inside, probably making a call, and I had a feeling I knew exactly who they were calling. My phone rang around noon. I didn't answer right away, let it go once, twice, then picked up on the 3rd ring. Hello. A pause, then that same controlled voice. Mr. Carter, Daniel Mercer said, measured as ever. We need to talk about what's happening on your property. I glanced over at the fence, now halfway complete, panels rising, one after another. Looks like construction to me, I said. Another pause, longer this time. This structure, he continued, choosing his words carefully. It's excessive. I almost laughed, not out loud, but enough that he could probably hear it in my voice. You mean like sending a crew onto someone else's land and cutting their trees without permission? I asked. Silence. Then, we've already discussed compensation. No. I cut in, still calm, still even. You offered to pay for trimming. That's not the same thing. His tone tightened, just a fraction. This fence is going to create tension within the community. I looked up toward the ridge again, at the line of homes, the glass, the cameras still pointed down. It already exists, I said. I'm just making it visible. There it was, the shift. Not in volume, not in words, but in control. Because for the first time since this started, he didn't have it. We believe, he said slowly, that some of those cameras you're referencing are for general security purposes. I let that sit for a second, then stepped a little closer to the fence line, looking directly at one of those lenses. Then they won't mind being turned away from my bedroom window, I said. That landed. You could feel it through the silence. We'll review the positioning, he replied. Good, I said. I'll continue building. And that was the end of that call. By late afternoon, the fence was complete. 8 feet tall. Solid from end to end. No breaks, no angles left open, just a clean, uninterrupted wall of steel that did exactly what it was supposed to do. It blocked everything. The view, the cameras, the casual glances from people who thought distance gave them permission. For the first time since I bought that place, I couldn't see the ridge. And more importantly, they couldn't see me. That night felt different. Quieter. Not because the world had changed, but because I had taken something back that I didn't realize had been slipping away. I sat out back for a while, just listening, no distant chatter, no flicker of movement from above, just wind through what was left of the trees and the low hum of the fence cooling in the night air. It should have felt like victory, but it didn't, not entirely. Because the truth is, walls don't just keep things out. They change what's inside too. Wednesday morning, something unexpected happened. A truck pulled up, not sneaking in through the back this time, not unmarked, clearly labeled, company logo on the side, crew in uniform. They stopped at the edge of the property, and one of the guys walked up to the front door and knocked. I opened it. Morning, he said, holding out a clipboard. We're here on behalf of Silverline Ridge HOA. We've been authorized to begin restoration work along your tree line, if that's still acceptable. I looked past him at the truck, then back at him. Restoration? I asked. Yes, sir. Native replanting, privacy screening, structural balancing, full coverage. It's all outlined here. He handed me the paperwork. Detailed. Professional. Signed. I skimmed it once, then again slower. Guaranteed survival rates. Follow-up maintenance. Full cost covered. No negotiation. I stepped aside. Go ahead, I said. And just like that, they got to work. Over the next few days, things shifted. New trees went in. Younger, sure, but strategically placed, dense, layered, designed not just to grow, but to block, to restore what had been taken in a way that made it harder to take again. Privacy screens followed, subtle, natural-looking, blending into the landscape. Not a wall like mine, but effective in a different way. And up on the ridge, the cameras started to move. One by one, angles adjusted. Positions changed. Some removed entirely. Others redirected back toward their own streets, their own driveways, where they probably should have been in the first place. No announcement. No acknowledgement. Just quiet correction. By Friday, the work was done. Saturday morning, I found an envelope at my front gate. No stamp. No postage. Just my name written across the front in clean, deliberate handwriting. Inside, a letter. Formal apology. Carefully worded. Of course, no admission of intent. No direct ownership of the decision, but enough. Enough to make it clear they understood where the line was now. And maybe more importantly, that I wasn't going to let them move it again. I stood there for a while after reading it, looking out at the new trees, the fence behind them, the ridge now hidden from view, and I realized something I hadn't expected. I didn't miss the view, not even a little, because what I had now felt better. It felt like mine again. But here's the thing. Not everyone would have handled it the same way. Some people would say I overreacted, that I escalated too quickly, that a conversation could have solved it. Maybe they're right. Maybe if I'd gone up there first, knocked on a few doors, tried to work something out, things would have played out differently. Or maybe they would have just smiled, nodded, and cut a little more next time. So I'm curious what you think. Was that fence a line that needed to be drawn, or did I turn a bad situation into something worse? Because where I stand now, behind 8 feet of steel and a row of growing trees, I sleep just fine, but I know not everyone would. If you've ever dealt with neighbors who pushed a little too far, or if you think there's a better way to handle something like this, I want to hear it. Drop your thoughts in the comments, tell me where you land on this. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that sit somewhere between right and wrong, between justified and questionable, go ahead and subscribe. Because sometimes, the line isn't where people think it is.